A very wise old teacher once said, "I consider a day's teaching wasted if we do not all have one hearty laugh." Gilbert Higgett. The teachers I'm going to tell you about definitely made me laugh on a daily basis, even if sometimes it was just a nervous laugh. I always looked forward to and simultaneously feared the first day of school because that was the day that you got to find out what kind of teachers you were going to be stuck with for an entire year. They could either make your life awesome or make it miserable, give you a love for learning, or make you despise the education system. There's usually no in between. Well, except for those teachers that do nothing and you can take a mental break the whole class, but I'm not going to complain. Sometimes those teachers are just a gift from the heavens. You know what I'm talking about. My first weird teacher experience was the first day of 8th grade. I walked into my language arts class, and the first thing I noticed was that all the chairs and tables were set up in a circle around the room. I'm thinking oh, maybe this is going to be cool, story time, you know? Maybe this is going to be one of those laid-back teachers that lets you nap in class if you've had a hard day. Man, aren't those the best? If only I had known that circle had an ulterior motive. Once we all got seated and the class started, the teacher, who was a lady, started describing how she believes that the eyes were the windows to the soul. And oh boy did she believe that. So much so that she said she was going to go around the circle and stare into our eyes so that she could know who we were, one by one. Do you know how agonizing it is to wait for your teacher to come around the circle and try to stare into your soul? I was sweating and starting to shake, and it didn't help that every time she looked into someone's eyes, she made sounds like, or, okay, and you didn't even know what that meant. I was starting to feel like I had something to hide. Like, what kind of deep dark secrets are you wringing from my soul, lady? And then I noticed she was saying extra and okays when people would look away early. And at that point in my life, I had real struggles with maintaining eye contact with adults. And when she got to me, I did the only thing I could do. I locked onto her pupils, opened my eyes wide, and then forced my mind to disconnect from reality. That went on for a few terrifying seconds, and then she said, "Okay," and walked on. Whew, glad that's over. Hold on now. She said okay. What does okay mean? And then I spent the rest of my day trying to decipher any hidden messages that could have been contained in that one word. Looking back on it, that okay might have meant are you okay? Because when I stare intently at something, my eyes kind of have the tendency to cross. So this might be what she saw. Fast forward to freshman year, and the next weird teacher occurrence I experienced was my first class of the day, health. The guy that taught it was notorious for being kind of brash and nonchalant about school stuff. I mean, he had to be. He taught the most awkward class. And one day I walk in, sit down, and I realize that he has his feet up on his desk and he's shaving. I'm pretty sure he even continued to shave after class started. It's okay, man. It's cool. Take your time. I'm in no rush to learn about our changing bodies. Yeah, so that's that. Now let's move on to my sophomore year. I had always been a part of show choir. The year before I was part of one that was all girls. But this year, I had made the one that was boys and girls. So you know what that means? Lots of love songs. And that meant that when we sang and performed, a lot of times we were going to have to pretend we were in love with someone and stare into their eyes as we sang. Awkward. And our choir teacher knew this, so she had us do an exercise on the first day of school. So she paired us all up and I got a guy, thankfully, that I had known before, so I felt slightly less embarrassed. And yet, what happened after that was still extremely uncomfortable. We had to hold each other's hands, stand as close as we could, get our faces as close as we could, stare each other in the eyes, not break our gaze, and sing scales. I had two thoughts. One, are my hands sweating? And two, does my breath smell terrible? I mean, it was the last class of the day, and sometimes school lunch doesn't leave your breath smelling minty fresh. It actually didn't end up being too terrible, except the guy I was with and I both kept laughing and we kind of got in trouble. And again, I had to stare into someone's eyes. For all I know, I could have gone cross-eyed again. It was all good, though. We all eventually stopped feeling awkward. The same year, I had a math teacher that was, let's say, passionate about what he did. He would throw things. Don't worry, not at us. just into the oblivion. He'd be going over something that we should have known by then, but didn't. We'd get it wrong, and to be honest, it was actually pretty funny. Except for the times when it seemed like he was actually slightly angry. He was usually just playing it up, though. Alright, junior year. My boyfriend and I, who you may already know from my comics, had just started dating, which made the following situation all the more weird. We were both in art classes because art was kind of our forte, and the guy who taught the classes saw us together one day in the halls. He turned around, smiled, and said, "You guys are going to have some really talented children." Woohoo! Can we back up here for a second? I mean, what do you say to something like that? We both just kind of nervously laughed and smiled. Thankfully, the situation stopped there. He probably realized what he said was pretty odd. I'd like to take a moment to remind you that the teachers that were really weird were usually the ones that I loved the most. And if you're a teacher, or you know one, which most of you probably do, show them your appreciation this year and let them know how much that they impact your life. Thank you, educators, for taking the time to impact our entire world through the younger generation. Even you, lunch ladies, thanks for feeding us. Or at least trying. A for effort.